Hey, welcome to Fire Engineering's Humpday Hangout, another one of our hangouts. It's our show, the issues and challenges of today's fire service. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my good buddy and world traveler, Assistant Chief Terry McGrath from Louisville, Louisville, Texas. We're joined by our regular, I would say, host and cast of characters, Chief Scott Thompson from the Colony, Texas, Chief John Salka from the FDNY retired and from the South Blooming Grove Fire Department, and the boss, Chief Bobby Halton. We had a guest lined up, and I think he might be having some technical difficulties. Firefighter Joe Bonanno from the FDNY, also, I would say, world-renowned firehouse chef period. But he's known for a lot to us for a lot of what he's done in the firehouse cooking wise and all that. So we'll see if Joe ends up making it with us. What we always do at the beginning of the show is remind you that if you have any comments for us, make sure you head to Twitter or social media feeds. But especially on Twitter, add hashtag FE Talk for Fire Engineering Talk so we can get to you. Now, that being said, we always start the show off with a little update from the boss, from Chief Halton. And Bobby, we just got done. Well, I know the deadline is tomorrow, but we just got done for a lot of us. I always make me some big pots of coffee, and I've been doing it for you since 1996, since they bought it. I've been reviewing classes when we used to have the gigantic, Bobby, these boxes of paper would come to your house before we got like the technology, and would have to sit down and write out everything and review and tear the sheets apart and all that stuff. And so I say this to reviewers now, anybody who bitches about what we have online definitely was not part of the original team for you, Bobby, because they have no idea what that was like. But I'll say this, every year, at first when I get the notification, oh, here it comes. And then I get into it. I love reading, guys. It's for so many of us. Scott, John, you've been teaching forever, FDIC and Firehouse and all over. Scott, you've been teaching all over as well. Bobby, when we first get into it, I love reading what people are submitting. Now, I want to get to the don'ts later, but as for the do's, you were just starting to ask for it live. Did we see anything exciting? And I have a list here, but I started thinking we don't have enough time to talk about all the classes I was excited about reading. And I'll usually put comments like for you, like, oh, yes, please. Yes, this is a big yes for me. Like when I do articles for you and Diane, I'll put capital letters like this would be mandatory reading for all my whole department. This would be mandatory reading for our chiefs. And then once in a while I'm like, oh, hell no, please no, God, or I dozed off about 3 times reading it. But there's some exciting stuff that new stuff. I mean, or it's a new, like fresh look at something that's been taught. John, you said it forever. There's nothing new in the fire service. But Bobby, I mean, this is an exciting part of the year. I know you and Diane, that's another thing I put in there. I have no idea how the hell you two actually, I mean, I know you do, but you have to sit down, look at all the reviewers' comments, then go and I don't know, and then put it together. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for you. It's daunting. Diane and I and our support staff that comes with us, Sarah and several others. So we were just doing a quick overview. We have about 1,200 submissions when you count everything all included. And so when we put them all together and we put all the reviews together, we've got to review about 4,800 pages of material to and that's just what we have to read, and that doesn't count the phone calls and the conversations. So basically from July 25th until August 12th, we blocked that time out because you can only really get through about 300 to 400 pages a day at that level. You know what I mean? And so it's a lot of reading and then a lot of trying to tabulate. Well, Salka loved it. McGrath hated it. Thompson thought he was on the fence. Lasky said he walks on water. Galliano said he's a bozo. So, and then you're like, okay. And I always love it because Rick and John are best friends. And invariably, because they all look at it independently, we'll have one from John that says, you got to have this guy. And you have one from Rick and says, I wouldn't let this guy in the door. You know what I mean? And you're like, holy cow. And so you just don't, and it's a good problem to have because you sit in the middle going, well, should you do the Solomon thing and cut the guy or gal in half, and and then see who says no, don't cut him in half. But so that's kind of exciting. The one thing we always tell people, and we implore them, please, if you haven't written for us, and we don't pick up your program, it's because we really don't know who you are. You know what I mean? And it might be a great program, but if we don't have some kind of relationship with you, either you've written online, or you've done a Hangout, or you're doing a radio show, or you're connected in some way, then we just don't have enough feel for you. And our reviewers will say that, like, I don't know who this person is, or sounds great, but nobody knows, nobody's seen them.
Well, Bobby, let me, I actually called you the other day and said, look, I'm not trying to sound like an ass with this, but this is about the fourth one in a row with no bio, no bio, or to be produced, or what is it? Bio, a resume upon request. I saw one. Then this guy's a pretty big speaker. The only one that ever got away with it to me in my entire lifetime, and like I said, I've been reviewing it for you since '96, was Alan Brunacini. Would say, firefighter, but even he put a lot of it. So
Alan always put a short bio. Fire chief, Phoenix, Arizona. Put the dates. He always put a bio in. He always did. The one I love was the guy said, go to my website. I'm like, man, if you're going to expect us to cruise to your website to read your bio, it ain't happening. You know what I mean? It ain't happening. So just crazy. Like, I got a proposal from John Salka. It says, John Salka served with the FDNY, was a volunteer firefighter. Before that, currently a volunteer fire chief. It's got a full bio from John Salka, as if I don't know who the hell John Salka is. But John Salka's bio, Scott Thompson's bio is in there. Ricky Lasky's bio is in there. If the people on the advisory board are taking the time to fill out the entire freaking form, then that tells you why they're there. You know what I mean? It's attention to detail.
Well, and that's my thing. You want to teach the biggest conference in the world, the biggest one. Give me something to look at, your bio. But then some people just put like a couple. It's like, I don't think there's really enough here to make a decision. But even like I said, the one guy, how arrogant to put down, it's me, or whatever. I'm like, really? And
So my favorite one was a personal one. He just sent it to me, and it was funny. And it was our good friend, John Norman. And you'll like this one, John. Norman sends, bio, went to lots of fires, learned some stuff. I was like, okay. And, it was just for us, it wasn't for a conference or anything. And I thought that was pretty good. But the one thing I think folks need to remember, and seriously, whenever everybody asks you to, do something like that, it's the brown M&M thing. It's the story of Van Halen. And Van Halen for years would do concerts. So they would have a clause in their contract that said, in the green room where they would come to before the show, had to be a glass bowl on a pedestal at 3 foot height, full of M&Ms, with all the brown M&Ms removed, all of them removed. And it was ironclad. And it said, if this is not there and we don't see it, 12 hours prior to the show, we can cancel without any penalty. And it was in their contract. And people thought, what a bunch of divas. What the hell's with the M&M? And it was all about the candy crap. No, what happened to Van Halen early in their career, they carried a big sound system, and they set it up on a stage. And the stage was not built according to their specifications for the weight of that equipment. And it had a partial collapse, and it almost killed one of their people, one of their road people almost got killed. It was a really serious accident. And they realized from that point forward that it was attention to detail, because they weren't just any band. They were a band with a oversized sound system for how Eddie Van Halen liked to sound in person. So they put that in there because they knew that when they showed up and that bowl was there, that those sons of bitches read the contract, and they would change it up. Like, it wasn't always brown M&Ms. So you couldn't just like, oh, they got to have brown M&Ms. They would change it up. So you had to read that freaking contract, every freaking word, or you'd miss it. And then they would know that you were skimming. You know what I mean? And so, like, if somebody asks you to do something and you want to be part of it, either do it or don't. But if you don't be surprised when they don't pick you up. You know what I mean?
Well, and like I said, it's just frustrating. I know you said 1,200. I think you sent me 1,600 to review. I'm joking, but I enjoy it. I mean, I do. I know it's a lot of work, but I mean, I like seeing what people, and then I like going to class, I like seeing people. I'm like, God, I remember reviewing that. It's his first time, and the excitement being able to teach at FDIC and get out in front of Terry. You were there this year. You got to see a bunch of people in classes, and that's I would put down. I would sit through this one in a heartbeat. I'd sit through this one, and then every now and then there's that. So real quick, and I think Pete sending Joe the invite again. There might have been a hiccup there, but before Joe comes on, great stuff. A lot of great things coming again, April 24th to 29th this year for FDIC and Indy. Bobby we just talked resume stuff. Some of the other don'ts, if you to not get selected is, we talked about it, obviously, if you don't put your resume in there. But how about, how many times do you get it? I get in the hallway where people come up and go, and this has been forever, I read the title, I read the description, that's not what they talked about. How important is it? And I know it's hard for you and Diana, and I know it's hard for us to match, when you're reading it, to go, God, this, I've even said, if he stays on topic, this looks very interesting. And then you get there and I'm like, I don't know why he changed it up or what he intended to talk about, but any comments about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because people create like a catchy title, and they know what they have in their head, you know what I mean? And it doesn't match the catchy title, you know what I mean? And I always tell people, try to stay away from the cute titles, because every now and then we had a dear friend, Mike McEvoy, his title, like, Don't Fear the Chicken. And it was about avian flu. And I'm like, okay, it's cute, but you had to know, you know what I mean? You had to know what avian meant, which was, don't fear the chicken, and so sometimes you can lose people with that kind of stuff. So you always want to talk about, you want to be as descriptive as you can and stay on the description if at all possible. So we're excited. We got a lot of great stuff to choose from. A lot of the tried and true, great people are coming back. It's going to be a wonderful year. We're doing some really great creative pricing for people so that departments and even individuals or groups can get some tremendous pricing, so that if you have 3 people, you can get prices that were cheaper than last year to come to FDIC.
Oh, very cool.
So which is great. So by doing group pricing, so when you think about it, for us, it works for us. It works for the attendee as well, because you get a cheaper price for everybody that's coming, but we got 3 people. So, and then when it goes up to 5, it gets even cheaper. When you get into people who are sending like, larger groups, or sending 10 or more, and you'd be surprised how many, like, if you're working in a small organization, small department, like, John's a chief in upstate New York, and he's got multiple neighbors. If you all get together and find out that 8 or 10 of you are going, put yourselves together as a group and buy a group, discount.
I don't think a lot of guys know you can do that. That's awesome.
You sure can. Yeah, you just say you're the the Upper New Rochelle Fire Group. You know what I mean? And you're in New Rochelle County, or you're in you're in Denton County, or just apply as a group. You absolutely can. You don't have to be a formally recognized organization or anything like that, but it's a way to get a discount and get your folks to the show. So that's great. And we got Joe. So I think that the cream sauce should be kept heated to about 128 degrees before you add the sugar. And then if you baste the bouillabaisse until it becomes a paste, you can slather it onto the stucco, and it'll give you added insulation in the case of a tornado. Does that sound right, Joe? Hey, Joe, Jeet yet? No, Joe.
Yeah, I still have the heavy Bronx accent. So how are you guys?
Good, Joe. So Joe, I'm obviously I'm Rick Lasky. We've talked several times about
Chief?
this.
Pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to meet you.
Got Terry
Got a
McGrath.
shade on that window? Do you got a shade on that window behind you?
Oh, we got that problem too.
Go to a different studio.
All right, I'll go somewhere else.
Turn around. There you go.
Yep.
It's perfect.
How's
right
that?
there.
There
There
we
you go.
Okay,
down
beautiful. All right.
So Joe, Terry McGrath is our co-host on this show among the group here. He's assistant chief in Louisville, Texas. Scott Thompson is the chief in the county, Texas. Chief John Salka, our best buddy, my best buddy, retired from the Bronx from FDNY. And then obviously the boss, Bobby Halton. But welcome to the show. I'm glad we talked about there might have been some technical difficulties because you're helping a friend out today and weren't sure about the
Yep.
signal and stuff. So we're glad that you're able to join us. We're glad we finally were able to pull this off.
Yeah, thank you, Chief.
We tried a couple of times. So for our viewers, let me read you part of, and I'm just gonna do part of Joe's bio. A 21-year veteran with the FDNY. We'll talk about that in a second. His service there. Served in ladder 319. I'm sorry, engine 319, ladder 129, ladder 152. Joe's brother Michael also served with the FDNY. While a firefighter, Joe becomes certified as a fitness trainer and nutritionist with certifications from New York University, the American Council on Exercise, the Aerobics and Fitness Association of America, and International Sports Medicine Association. Joe's the author, we posted this, of course, of both the Healthy Firehouse Cookbook and the Firehouse Grilling Cookbook, and we're going to talk about one more of his in a little bit here. Joe won many firehouse cooking contests, which, if you know me, I'm very partial to it. All the cooking I've done in the firehouse. Has appeared several times on Live with Regis, Martha Stewart, The Today Show, Good Morning America, CBS Saturday Morning, and Fox New York, among others. Upon leaving the fire service, Joe received his culinary chef's degree with honors for the Culinary Academy of Long Island, doing internships at 2 of Long Island's top restaurants. Joe also teaches at the a la carte cooking school in Lynbrook, New York. And this is what we're going to get to in a little bit, hopefully, Joe had just published a 3rd book, a children's book, and we're going to get him to talk to us about that. And before we forget, if you're looking for any information on Joe, we'll get to his website at the end of today and his email if you got any questions. So, Joe, once again, welcome, brother.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, and I also wanted to give kudos to my my father, who served 34 years with Engine 88.
Engine 8. Oh, hey, John. There you go. The 18th Battalion is.
Yeah, 88 engine and 38 truck in the South Bronx. Yep.
Yeah, well, I know we've talked about one of John's favorite company officers of all time, Lieutenant Tim Klett, retired out of 88 engine just recently, and great firehouse, great crew. The oldest firehouse I think I've ever been that looks the newest. It's in better shape than brand new firehouses I've been in, but what a great place. So thanks to your dad, of course, for what all he did. So Joe, start us off here. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then how you got into what you're doing, because we want to focus on that, and then talk about the kitchen table a little bit. John and I have done a podcast just on that called about the Firehouse family, what goes on at the table, the meal. We'll tell some stories about that, how you get kicked out of the club if you bitch about the cook, and so on and so forth. But so how did you get rolling with all that?
Well, actually, if I put I just did another book, you didn't mention, but I just did another book for the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and it's called American Firehouse Cuisine. So I just published that last September 11th for the 20th anniversary. So in that book, I actually put a chapter on the history of firehouse cooking. So how it happened for me is in 1984, you may remember John Salka. He wrote a little paperback book called The Firefighter's Cookbook. And it was a little 5,000 copy thing. He didn't think it was going to do anything. He just did it kind of for fun. He was in 58 engine, John Salka. And he wrote that, he's a basic firehouse cook. He wrote this book. And how it turned out is that Phil Donahue, if anybody remembers that talk show, he was leaving Chicago and he's coming to New York. So he asked his producers, listen, how could I warm up to the New York audience? What could we do? So the producers said, you know what? New Yorkers love their firemen, and they love that they cook and everything. They always see them in the stores flirting with girls and whatnot and buying food. Why don't we do a cooking segment? And some guy named John Salka just did a little paperback. And he goes, great, have him on the show. We'll warm up to the New York audience. So he did a cooking show on Phil Donahue. And actually, John Salka, he was burning the chicken cutlets because he was too busy talking to the host and a little nervous, which made the segment go well. After that, and this is 1984, after he did that Phil Donahue segment, the book went on the New York Times bestseller list for 9 weeks in a row. 9 weeks in a row, it went like off the charts, crazy.
And I still got my copy. I still have my copy.
Yeah, and I spoke with John several times about it. He was like, I had no idea this was going to be this crazy. Because when I was approached in 1993 to do mine, I opted to do, because I had fitness training background, I opted to make a healthy book. And, no slight against the firefighter's diet, but a lot of them, mashed potatoes with 4 sticks of butter in it. And, heart attack is prevalent in the fire service. So because I had fitness qualifications, I wasn't the greatest cook, A lot of guys in 129, if they're watching this, will probably be screaming the same thing. I'm just an average firehouse cook, but I lean towards making the meals healthy. So I took a course at the New School, called How to Write a Cookbook and Get It Published. There was an editor from Hearst. I mentioned that there was a best-selling fireman's cookbook. And unfortunately, John Salka himself wound up having a triple bypass.
Oh.
So I didn't want to play on that. And, I just said, listen, a lot of firefighters that die may not be where they want. It's a life and death job. So a lot of guys say, hey, treat yourself. You're not going to live forever and that kind of thing. So I said, my idea is, if I was going to do a cookbook, it would be a healthy firehouse cookbook. Well, the Hearst editor, Harriet Bell, she just lit up. She says, wow, that's a great idea. Do you think you could put it together? I'm like a half-ass firehouse cook. I'm not really a professional anything. And I said, you know what? This opportunity came. I says, knocking on my door. It was breaking the door down. I says, I got to follow through. So what I did is I put an ad in Firehouse magazine asking for recipes around the country because they didn't want to make it a New York firefighters cookbook. They wanted a national appeal. And I got about 140 recipes, plus guys that I work with in 129 and guys in 152, guys in 319, guys I met on the job through my brother also, and put together about 120 recipes. And in 1995, they published the Healthy Firehouse Cookbook. And it was, after that, it was just like John, it got crazy. And John warned me, Joe, you're still working full time. You're going to look at your chart for about 6 months. It's going to be night tour, TV appearance, day tour, TV appearance, TV. And, you think it's all fun and I'm not complaining, but it's always a lot of coordinating and work.
Well, and you say that about cooking healthy, and Terry and Scott can remember in Louisville, Texas, where I had the honor service fire chief, and Terry's still the assistant chief, and Scott was our train chief before he went to college chief. We had a very, very popular cooking show there. I mean, the people there, a couple of thousand rows, they just ate it up, called Firehouse Fixins and all this stuff. And I remember, I'm half Italian, half Polish. I came from Chicago. We had people on the Italian side. They had Italian restaurant in Chicago. We had, all that. Nothing I cooked. I don't even think the salad was healthy. But anyway, I remember the first comment I got after I got done doing my first show as a guest. I'm like, God, everything I just made, it's good, but yeah, and it's kind of funny because John, my partner, John talks about it. My guys went up and Joe, and they rode out several times in the 18th Battalion when we created Chiefs Aids, and they got to visit everything in the 18th there, and they were mesmerized because, and John, you remember the story. Cunningham, one of BC's called me, Terry and Scott, and said, "Boss, we didn't eat till 9:30 tonight because the truck was still out." And I'm like, well, yeah, didn't Chief Salka tell you they don't sit down unless they all sit down together as a family, the whole thing. And John used to talk about that all the time, that if you were out in the buggy, you'd call back, say, go ahead, get going. Don't let the guys wait if you're at a job or something. But I mean, how important, and we'll just throw this to John real quick. We always talk about, please don't let the probie cook unless the probie's a chef. I don't know why you would do that, make the new guy cook. But John, how important was the kitchen table, the meal, and most importantly, the people that were preparing the meal for you in the 18th?
Yeah, it was always great. I mean, it seems a lot of places are not doing the big meals anymore. A lot of guys are bringing food in and doing all sorts of other nonsense. And most firehouses in New York there's still 2 meals a day tour meal and a night tour meal. And I still think it's sort of like the event of the evening. It's the event of the shift. It's, everybody's together preparing a meal, and then then you have it, waiting for somebody to get back, the engine or the truck or whatever in between. And it's just, I mean, it makes the kitchen or the dining room, the focal point of what's going on for much of the night, outside of, work and runs, obviously. But it's always very important, and it still is. I mean, I'm out 10 years. I haven't worked this shift in a long time, but I haven't heard any changes, and I still talk to guys, and I think it's still a regular routine. The meal is like the focal point of what's going on. I think it's great. And I think the places that miss that, the places that have either got away from it or have never really had it, the hotel firehouses where the guys are eating in their, in their little bunk rooms, with their little, private rooms. You're just missing that whole social aspect, and there's so many things that don't come together when you don't all sit down together and break bread,
Well, same thing at home. We don't sit down as a family. It's the same thing in the firehouse. Now, Joe, I got to ask you, because we've all talked about this. My wife gets on me. I just did it for my Valley house here, but the Wichita West. So we did this thing every 4th of July, and I made my lasagna. I can't make nothing small, dude. I can't. All those years cooking a fire. My wife says, you can't make anything like, because if I make something for just her and I, that's why I like the cookbooks that have the smaller recipes. Because I looked and I go, God, them 4 or 5 eggs look kind of lonely in there by themselves. And she's always like, you can't make nothing small. And I'll just ask you, what advice do you give people when it comes to, especially firehouse cooks, guys who cook at the firehouse? I think a lot of guys struggle with making it at home, when they're used to cooking for 8, 10, 15 people. I mean, it's just,
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, when you're cooking en masse, that's one of the, I just heard John saying that's one of the, I guess if you want to call it the joys of being a fireman, was to sit down and have a meal together. And it's funny, my father was 34 years as a fireman. I don't ever remember him discussing how important that was to sit down together as, and I don't mean my personal family, but the family of firefighters. And when I got to a firefighter, I thought that was one of the most, if you want to call it caring and endearing things you could do for each other, was prepare a great meal together, solve all the problems of everybody's life, whatever. And it all gets done around the Firehouse Kitchen table. But if you're asking me like a smaller meal, yeah, because I had to scale up meals for everybody in general. And, after I went to culinary school, it's actually kind of funny because a lot of people think because you went to culinary school, listen, I'm single, I live by myself. If I have a girlfriend over or something, yeah, I make a meal for 2. And everybody thinks like because you went to culinary school, every meal is going to be cordon bleu and this and that. A lot of times it's a chicken breast on a George Foreman grill and a bag of success brown rice for myself. And that's for the healthy aspect. Yeah, I mean, for my sister and stuff at Thanksgiving dinner, we have a lot of relatives over, we cook en masse, which that's one of the things I really miss. But I guess advice for you, I mean, you could scale down pretty much any recipe, but I mean, it's hard to make a gourmet thing because most of them are served 6 to 8 standard recipes, and to scale them down just for individual, it's a little harder, can be done. But I can speak as a chef. Most of the chefs I know too, they just prepare basic stuff at home. And if there's a special occasion, you go all out with a recipe and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Bobby, go ahead.
Joe, wouldn't you agree though that sometimes the basic meals are like the most bonding of all? You know what I mean? Because sometimes there's just nothing better than a good steak and a potato, maybe some green beans. You know what I mean?
100%. And I'm going to tell you my go-to meal, and it's not because I'm part Italian, but my go-to please the fireman meal, especially in the winter, was chicken cutlet Parmesan with about 6 inches of cheese on it.
Right?
And garlic bread.
Right. And if you want to get crazy, a little pasta. You know what I mean?
A little pasta, right. And that, it had the comfort food factor. It had the size factor. It had the gooey cheese factor. It had the, even if you had to warm it up later factor, we can get into some of the food practical jokes too that we did too if you want. There's plenty of them.
One of my favorite deals, a good buddy of mine, Jimmy Messina, not the musician, but just another New York guy. But one of his favorite lines was he used to tell people, I'm with the CIA, Culinary Institute of America. They also have a school in New York.
Oh yeah, in Hyde Park. Yep.
And that's where he went. And I would laugh.
Wow. That's the Harvard. That's the Harvard of cooking.
That's a great school.
Yeah, that's the Harvard of cooking schools.
That's a great school. And when he got out, it was interesting. Most of the guys like him that go to that school, he got a job as he wasn't the chef, but he was the guy that would go table to table at this really nice place that he worked, and he would tell you how it was made. He would say, well, this is blah, 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 and it's blah, 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 and they do blah, 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 for 14 minutes, and they blah, 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 and flip it over. And I'd be like, really? And he goes, he knew all that stuff. He was like the maitre d', I guess is what it's called. So
yeah.
They don't have one at the Arby's where I usually dine, but if they did, so, but I always, I'm with you. I was never the lead cook because I always worked in houses that had great cooks, but I was always the chop or stir, or I was that guy that the cook would go, okay, do this. You know what I mean? Do this.
Well, and I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you, all the years I cooked, and the guys used to like me because we could talk about the one pot chefs that when you get done, there's only one pot that's clean. But my wife loves it because I'm keeping things clean. I'm working, I'm doing stuff. And I'm like, you know what, come back. I don't even want you unloading the groceries. Let me put everything away where I want to put it away when I get back from the store. And I know there's someplace stuff like that, but we can't go any further without mentioning this, Joe. And John, you and I've talked about this a bunch of times. Terry and Scott jump in. Big time rule in the firehouse. Do not, capital, do not piss off the cook. And where I came from, they kick you out of club. They would grab your plate They would grab you. If you kept it, they'd grab your plate and slam it upside down at the restaurant. Say, get out. You're not eating with us. Don't piss off the cook.
Hey,
So-
I was gonna tell Bobby that, you know, those old Westerns, Chief, you know, when they tell like the wife was delivering a baby, and so they tell the husband, go tear sheets and boil water. You got to give him something to do, put him in. If you're the guy standing at the end of the aisle shredding cheese, Bobby, that's you're the boil water, tear sheets guy. Give him something to do, put him down the end of the deal.
Keep that idiot away from the food.
John, tell Joe, and Joe's got, I'm sure, a ton of stories. How about your hot dog story, John? With what was it, the BC, the chief or DC that was bitching about the hot dogs and the fires?
Yeah, where I was the captain in 48 engine. I mean, listen, everybody thinks they worked in the toughest firehouse where the crowd was the toughest and the guys took no shit from nobody. But anyway, I think it was a captain. I think it was a captain of the engine or the truck one day came in and said, I forget what was going on. They had a busy day. They came back from a job. They had hot dogs for lunch. They just threw a bunch of hot dogs on it and making hot dogs for lunch. And I must tell you, that's not a common thing in the FDNY, having hot dogs for lunch. But anyway, they had hot dogs for lunch, and the captain made a pretty big error. And you know what he said? He said, hot dogs again? Which doesn't seem like a big deal, but they had hot dogs for 30 days.
Yep.
30 days.
Yep.
Lunch and dinner, lunch and dinner, lunch and dinner, lunch and dinner times 30. They suffered themselves just so nobody would do that again. You know, that's pretty strict.
Well,
Go ahead, Joe.
pretty universal in any firehouses. If you say, you know, fellas, I really don't like you making fun of my whatever it is, car, house, nose, ears. If you say I don't want you, you're going to hear it times a million. We had a lieutenant come in, and he said, nicknamed him the Duke, and he came in a new assignee, and he said, listen, fellas, a lot of guys call me the Duke. I hate being called that. Now, you know, everywhere in the firehouse, everywhere you look, on the toilet paper, it said the Duke. In between the grout on the tile in the bathroom, it said the Duke. Everywhere we went. So it's the same with the food thing. If God forbid you, like you just said, I don't like hot dogs or hot dogs again, you're going to get them every day for the rest of your life.
Well,
But the one thing really cracked me up about the food, funny story, is they used to say free food has no calories. Because a lot of guys got out of the meal because they were basically cheap. So they say, you know, I'm not eating tonight. I'm on a diet. He goes, well, the lieutenant's going on vacation. It's free. All right, I'm in. Well, wait a minute. You just were out because you're on a diet, but now you're in because it's free. So free food has no calories. That was another big joke in there.
I had a captain, I can't remember, I think it was a 13s or 28s. Anyway, the guy, he had a rule. Nobody was out.
Yes.
He didn't take, somebody would float in or get detailed and I'm not eating today. He said, we don't care. Here, I don't care if you don't eat, you're in. Because he goes, because I know I'll catch your ass at 2 a.m. where you're facing this fridge, eating as fast as you can. You know, and it was true. You'd always catch the Freddy at 2 a.m. You know, a call would come in and a crew would go out and there's the Freddy in the refrigerator, like the guy that didn't.
They were notorious for that. The guys that were cheap, who would get out on the meal. Now, and you know they're starving. And especially if you're making something as smelly and smell delicious like chicken cutlet parmesan, it's wafting up the pole hole through all the firehouse. Everybody could smell it for an hour. Can't wait to eat it. You know the guy that's telling you I want out because I'm on a diet. You know he's dying to eat it, and he knows. Usually, if I cooked, I made enough for like a trayola of food for everybody. There was plenty left over in case we had a job in the middle of the night and were hungry. You know he was going to be digging in the. So the counter to that, what they did one time was they took a yellow sponge and cut it in the shape of a chicken cutlet, covered it, left it in the fridge, and covered it with cheese because they know he was going to go in there in the middle of the night and try to get a Frio. You know, so next thing you know, we see the cheese and the sponge in the garbage in the morning because that's how we got him back. We hid the real chicken cutlets where we could get them and put that in because we knew he was going to go in there and get it.
Oh God, we've told so many, John. I mean,
you know, there was a chief in the 4th Battalion when I was in 18 truck, and he did the same thing. He would never eat, and then he would always eat the leftovers. You know, this bastard would eat right out of the refrigerator. The door would be open. All you'd see is his ass. His head was in the refrigerator. He was eating out of the bowl, you know? So the rule in 18 truck, well, at least when that chief was working, was don't eat the leftovers. Why? Because when they got done with the meal, they swept the floor and they mixed it in with the leftovers and put it back in and put it back in the refrigerator. And everybody knew it. We'd all be sitting there drinking coffee, watching TV, or watching a game an hour later. He would come down. You'd see him. Hey, who made the stew? Who made and he'd be eating it. And we all know what was in there, but it was terrible.
Well, and Joe, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so I have a deep appreciation for people that are very good at whatever your trade is. So Joe, you're not just, trained as a chef, but you obviously have a passion, a lot of knowledge. And so there's a lot of, but what truly is funny to me in the fire service are the guys who think they can cook, or the guys that get way outside of their wheelhouse and their comfort zone. And Chief, I don't know if you remember the story. I know Scott does, but, we're kind of a meat and potato state down here. And so in our firehouses, a really good meal is usually basic stuff that you go to the store and get. You don't have to stray too far, but they go into a grocery store, they go, sauntering by the meat counter, and one of the guys sees an octopus back there and decides, yeah, we'll take that. Well, the guys that are with them, this is Louisville, Texas, man. It's an octopus. First of all, I don't even know what an octopus was doing in that store.
Exactly.
I have a feeling someone ordered it, maybe didn't pick it up or whatever the case. But this guy decides, oh yeah, let's have the octopus. Now the guys that are with him, I fault them because that's the point that they should have stepped in, for everyone's safety and said, hey, time out. We're way outside the wheelhouse here. But anyway, he bought it, took it back, and attempted to prepare an octopus. However it is you do that. But to this day, people still talk about that experience. And so I'm kind of one of those guys, like, you got to stay in your lane when it comes to cooking a meal.
Well, as Clint Eastwood said in that movie, a man's got to know his limitations.
Man's got to know his limitations. And he also said in the other movie, and nobody puts ketchup on a hot dog for us Chicago people. But so I know John's favorite dish in the firehouse has been fish. And he's looking at me now with a scowl because he knows what I'm talking about. He's like, whenever he was working, John, right? If they were doing fish, they always took care of the chief with something else, made you a different dish because they knew it. Two things. One is I learned from some great guys. John Saute, they call him Ma Archer because of Archer Avenue, and Bob Gleich taught me how to cook in the firehouse, how to look in the refrigerator and go, okay, we didn't do it. I'm going to do this, and just how to make it all work. And they warned me, anytime you make pasta, chili, meatloaf, they're going to eat too much and they're going to be thrown up at calls later on. And you talk about, I sent my cousin Mickey once, I remember this, to the grocery because I don't want to go shopping. I'm like, I ain't shopping. I've been doing this too much. They wanted to do ribs. It was a Saturday. So I'm like, all right. I said, here, we're going to do a slab per two guys, blah, 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 blah. He comes back, goes, hey, I need some money. Out of kidding me. I said, well, it's like, I need $175. I said, what? He goes, well, they look too small. So I bought him the whole thing. Joe, he bought the whole thing with the brisket on. I'm like, we can't cook. So Jeff Cohesi goes, hey, why don't we do Rib Fest? I go, you want? So we cook them all. No sooner than we get done, like Vikings, all the bones in a bowl, all shit. They take the tones off. He can't snap his bunker pants. He's chasing his clip in a circle because his belly, he's in a circle. Then I remember we're up on a roof. We cut a hole in the roof. Fire come out. We're trying to get off. And he drops his axe. And he looks at me. I go, I ain't picking it up for you. And then he's doing like the limbo, kind of trying to get down because he can't because he ate so much. But that all being said, the advice I got from some of these guys, Joe, there's a lot of guys that are going to be watching this that cook in the firehouse or thinking about cooking in the firehouse. And a lot of times I think we miss this from someone like you, advice-wise. If you've got a young guy or gal that is wanting to, has a desire, or someone who currently is, what advice do you give? And let's specifically, I know you do it all over, but in the firehouse, to the firehouse wannabe, the next cook or the one that's doing it, what advice do you give them about shopping, preparing a meal, the whole thing? If you were going to talk to us, I said, Joe, I want to cook at my firehouse.
Well, first thing I would say, if you want to go outside the envelope, as I was just saying before, if you want to go outside the envelope and you're skilled at it, also be careful that you're not picking some, like I said, you can't go wrong with chicken cutlet parmesan. You can't go wrong with spaghetti and meatballs. You can't go wrong with, like I said, spaghetti meatballs, garlic bread. Can't go wrong with pot roast. So pick the basics and get really good at it. My advice would be, say, get the base. First of all, use a recipe. And I got a lot of flack about that when I started to go to culinary school and professionalize it. It's like, this is a typical fireman. A real cook doesn't need a recipe. Well, every regular chef that I work for, including school, uses a recipe. You don't go driving without a GPS or directions. So why would you think? Because I think the standard thinking for somebody that is a really good cook is that off the top of their head, they can, yes, there's a few things I can make and not need a recipe that I've made a million times. But if you're going to try that, so my advice to a new probie would be stick with the basics, right? If you're going to, and try it at home first. Don't experiment with the guys you work with. Make it for your parents or your girlfriend, whoever you happen to be with. Make it at home first so that you go through a trial run and then bring it into the firehouse and do it. But like I said, I would stick with basics. Yes, they're meat eaters in general, but you know, why just get meatloaf? You can make a nice pot roast with potatoes and carrots and all the stuff that's pretty healthy still on top of it. And I think if you went like that, you wouldn't be wrong. But my advice, cooking standard, is even if it's pot roast, use a recipe.
Well,
And the other thing, go ahead. Well,
I was just saying, I still do, but go ahead, buddy.
But you know, as a chef, most people don't even know how to read a recipe. The recipe is written in order of the ingredients and in the order of how it's done. And you know, pretty much I had to test all my recipes. So if it says saute, like I said, pot roast, saute, sear the outside and then put it in a slow pot. If it says sear the outside, all four sides, approximately 2 to 3 minutes each, somebody at medium. That's what they mean. Saute 2 to 3 minutes each side at medium. So for you to think you're like turn it up to high, just do it real fast. You burn the outside. It doesn't. So follow the directions. It's, you know, it's firefighting is the same thing. It's pretty simple if you follow the directions, but most people don't.
Well, and you know, Bobby just put, what does saute mean?
Yeah, here's where we start with the problems. I don't know what sear means. I don't know what saute means. Like my wife will say to me, she'll say, I'm cooking something, but I got to make, what the hell is it called? Like the base or whatever, or I got to make and I'm like, okay, what the hell's that? You know what I mean? And she just like, I'll be honest, Terry was spot on. I can burn water. I can't cook. I can't make mac and cheese from a box.
Cheese grater. That's your new nickname. Cheese grater.
Cheese grater. I am the cheese grater. I'm the guy that would say, they would tell me, stir the spaghetti, but don't mess it up. Like they knew that even letting me near the spaghetti pot was a disaster in the making. I can't cook.
You know, when people say that to me, you have to have the desire to do it if you like to eat. You can follow directions, I'm sure. So if it says pick a simple recipe, you can follow directions step by step. It's hard to screw that up.
Directions. I'm a firefighter. I screw it up and then I go back to the directions.
But I'll tell you, just what Joe said, I can remember more meals I've screwed up thinking I knew what, you know, I swear to God, I just did my lasagna that had been cooked by my mom, my grandma, my great-grand. And I put it, and Joe, you said something a while ago, when I would copy recipes, I go, no, I'm gonna put everything back in order here, like I think it should be with the spice. I'm like, and I was screwing up more shit going, why is it not working? And somebody said, because you took it out of order. You know, you don't just pile, all right, so put all your spices in a bowl in this particular recipe and mix them, throw it in. No, you're not supposed to do that. So just you saying that brought back some.
Exactly. And, you know, that's one of the reasons I wanted to go to culinary school, is to learn. And, you know, you just asked before, what does saute mean? I didn't know what that meant. The true meaning of it. Saute is French for jump. And what they mean by that is, and when I teach classes, this is what I tell people. And I see firemen doing this all the time. You put a pan on, you're going to make eggs. They crack the eggs, they put the eggs in, and then they put the heat on. Saute means jump. So in other words, the heat has to be on already to a medium, which says heat to medium, and then put the eggs in, you heat to medium. So what they mean by saute means to, if you want to use the word fry, but it has to be heated up first. Because what happens is if you heat it up while thing's in there, it'll weld itself to the bottom of the pan as it's heating. So you heat it. When you put an egg in, when you put a chicken cutlet in, saute, it jumps a little because it hits the heat. What happens if you put your hand on heat? Your hand contracts, right? It's the same like meat. It's the same like eggs. It's going to be hot first. I see it all the time, firemen, cooking classes. They, you know, it says heat, you know, saute chicken breast at medium. They put the breast in, they put seasoning on it, put the breast in, and they put the heat on. Now it's got to go from low all the way to medium. While it's doing that, the meat is sticking to the bottom of the pan. If you already heated it to medium, which is what the directions say, and then drop the chicken breast in, it contracts, it doesn't stick to the bottom. And now, again, following directions.
And
So
you,
there's your
directions.
that's
you
what
can
saute.
screw up really expensive cooking pans by doing that, can't you, Joe?
Yes, yes.
My wife has accurately accused me of that many times. She won't let me near any of her stuff. Matter of fact, she doesn't even let me in the kitchen.
Those are the guys that take the hot pan and they're going to clean it right away with cold water, and they can't understand why later the bottom's bowled out on it or it doesn't sit right or whatever on the stove and stuff, because you're taking this hot piece of metal and throwing in ice cold water to cool. I mean, but
Exactly.
I'm just, but and back to, and John, I wanted you, and I keep going back to this about, we always talk about the fire services as a family, and it is. We've got those crazy uncles we lock in the cellars and stuff like that, but we are a family. And I just remember so many times, whether it was our firehouse, the firehouse I grew up in, my dad's firehouse, in all those years in Chicago with John, the feeling you got when you sat down at the kitchen table. First of all, it was an exciting night, just we're going to sit down for the meal. The whole family thing I want to get to John with in a second here, but my wife today still uses a phrase, hooty hoot. And I had 10 to 15 guys in a firehouse on Central Avenue near Midway Airport. And Ronnie Mikulovich used to go, Ricky, because he had the big table and, because there wasn't one big table, right? You had a big table, a little table and a counter and a little kid's table. He go, Ricky, give me a little signal when you're going to say, instead of chow's on, give me a little signal so I can get to my chair before anybody else does. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, I don't know, just say hooty hoot. So this is back in the 80s. Ever since then, I would just go, before I'd say chow's on, I just get to speak. I just go, hooty hoot. And Ronnie would just put his paper down, get up and just casual. And he knew it again. He was always, for years, no one knew how he got to the table. My wife she just explained to my daughter coincidentally this year. She goes, what's hooty hoot? And she had to tell a whole story about that. John, how many times we talked about, and you mentioned it even before we went live on the air, solving all the world's problems, like Joe said, at the kitchen table, but sometimes there's good stuff that comes up the kitchen table, and sometimes there's some not so good stuff. And for our younger audience, how many people in the 18th Battalion, 45 inch and 58 truck, tell me about the conversations that go on the kitchen table with the guys. How many people have their cell phones out, their iPhones out the kitchen table while you guys are eating a meal there,
And I'm not sure how many places have that. Everybody's got their own little etiquette rules, their own little do's and don'ts in the firehouse. There's no phones in the kitchen in 45 and 58. If I remember correctly, 48 and 56, where I was a captain, neither. But it was actually stated, and I heard it repeated to a couple of people in the kitchen a couple of times, like, a young guy be sitting at the table practically by himself, middle of the afternoon, lunch is over, and an older guy would walk into the kitchen, and the young guy be sitting at the kitchen table with his phone out. And he said, what are you doing, Tommy? I'm just checking my emails. He said, not in the kitchen. That was the rule. The rule was, you're not allowed to even have your phone out in the kitchen. If it rings, go walk out of the kitchen and go answer it. If you got an email or a text or a voice or whatever you're doing, go do it somewhere else. Sit up on your bed or sit somewhere else and do it. I thought that was a great rule. And that's the same, like in 48 and 56, there's no TV in it. There's no TV in the dining room. No TV, never was, never will be. So you want to watch TV, go in the TV room. You want to eat dinner, sit here and talk with us, sit in the dining room. So it doesn't make it right or wrong because every place is different. Every place has different rules. But wherever if you're a fireman for 20 years in one place, that's what you know. If you're a fireman, lieutenant, captain, and you bounce around for a couple of years and go to different places, you see the different sets of rules and the different atmospheres in a different firehouse.
And it goes back, I said, my greatest, sometimes when I'm talking experience, I'm talking tactics and strategy, sometimes I go back to something I heard at the kitchen table, not even in the classroom, things I learned from my mentors and from people just sitting there listening, drinking coffee, going, oh, I got to write that down. I got to remember that, and so on and so forth. I know, Scott, you built a bunch of new firehouses. Let me throw this hand grenade out here to this group, Joe. And I know this is my buddy John Salka's favorite topic, but Scott, you've built some new firehouses. How many locks do you have on the refrigerators and on the food cabinets in the firehouse?
Yeah, they each got their own closets with the refrigerators locked up that the truck can't get into.
So Joe, I tell this story, Terry, I'm at Sevens. And we're standing with Chief T. He's showing me their Sonic Ice machine. They like the Sonic Ice little chip. And they're bringing the Cub Scout troop, right? Blue uniforms through for the tour. And they come in, Joe, into the day room. They see all the recliners like, oh, and he's like, oh, we're rarely ever in there. This is for break time. And this we have our meal. And I'm just sitting there. And he gets done. He asks for questions. And a little kid raises his hand, excuse me. He goes, yes. He goes, Firefighter Jones. He goes, why are there locks on the refrigerators? And he pauses and he goes, because every now and then we have hobos come through here. And I went, hobos? Really? He wanted to say, I said, you don't even No, you locked it up because you don't want C shift getting into your mayonnaise, like John says, or into that half empty jar of Skippy peanut butter with just that much junk. You put locks on your refrigerators. Joe, how many locks?
Joe, have you ever
Mm.
seen a lock on a refrigerator in any FDNY firehouse?
Never.
Never. Never. And I've never seen more really than one refrigerator, certainly not for
One
shifts.
refrigerator. Yep,
You know?
one refrigerator. I know.
Yeah.
I've been, John. I've been to a few around the country with the book and stuff. I've been to other fires, and I thought that was, I mean, like C shift refrigerator with a lock on it, B shift refrigerator with a lock on it. I never saw that. Not in ever in one fire.
I love what
Me
you
neither.
guys do with the commissary, Joe. I love what we've talked about this, where everybody puts in, and you could do it with ABC shift. You don't have to have like the world like you would have in FDNY where there's no shifts. You just have work groups. Just how about everybody chip in and we buy all our ketchup and our mayonnaise and all our stuff together. So there's no reason to steal out of someone's refrigerator unless you really want leftovers. You're just stealing from yourself. I mean, just pull your money, buy all the stuff
Yeah.
that you didn't go.
Yeah, staples and condiments. I thought that was a great idea. I don't know what we chipped in at the time. It was $5 a paycheck or $10 a paycheck. And, like you said, mustard, ketchup, salt, pepper, spices, cooking oil, all the stuff everybody uses. And every shift uses it whenever they want. I think it's a
Well,
great
I always
idea.
said that. My favorite phrase about the places with 3 refrigerators with locks on them is we trust each other with our lives, but not with our mayonnaise.
But I like that one. I'm going to steal that one. I'm going to give you a footnote. I'm going to steal that one if I go on TV.
But part of the discussion earlier too about, and I've seen those places with multiple refrigerators. We had a couple of houses that were so old. The one normal size modern refrigerator was a big deal to fit into that kitchen because the kitchens were so old that they didn't have the space. A lot of the houses that I worked in, those houses were built, before refrigeration. Really, they had an ice box, and then it got replaced by a refrigerator. And you could see where they kind of crammed it in. Something else had been taken out. But to the point earlier about no TVs in the kitchen and no phones in the kitchen, and out of respect to Joe, I think, and guys like Joe that really knew how to cook. Like I was privileged to work with a dozen really great cooks, and it took effort. They were conscientious about it. They planned our meals, and it was a sign of respect to those guys too. You know what I mean? And not just that we never made them clean a pot or any of that kind of stuff, but which was important too. Like if you cook, you don't clean. We clean. You eat, you clean. But the other thing too was when somebody spends that amount of time and energy to cook for you, sit down and enjoy it and talk to them and share. Like at my home, and I've been married for 48 years to the same woman, my boys would stand and wait till their mother sat down to eat. And then there are no phones, there's no television, there's nothing during mealtime. And it was the same in every firehouse I ever worked in too. TV's off, phones are off, and we didn't have cell phones when I was on the line. We may have had the what do you call them, the ones that had the text stuff.
The beeper, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll tell you another thing, Bobby. If a guy's going to go in there and cook your meal for him, come and eat it while he intended that meal to be hot or to be fresh. Like it used to drive me crazy. Cook a meal, tell everybody, hey, dinner's ready. And then 20 minutes later, they come walking in there. And that irritates me because I always felt like if that guy took the time to go in there and cook a hot meal or a good meal, come and eat it and show them the respect. But he'd come in there 20 minutes later and eat it and go, I mean, it was all right. It was kind of, cold or whatever.
The men and women who cooked for me in the firehouse, without exception, were amazing. They cooked. I got meals in the firehouse from men and women that cooked in the firehouses for me and for the crews that were just phenomenal. And the amount of the diligence that they put into it. And it was just like the chow fund too. I mean, every now and then you get some bozo who'd cheat the chow fund and you'd be like, seriously, dude, you're not going to chip it? I don't drink coffee. I don't care. I really don't care if you don't drink coffee. Give me your $5. You know what I mean? Because there's other stuff that there was salt, pepper, all the condiments, but we called it the coffee fund because you throw in a pot of coffee, everybody would drink it during the day. You know what I mean? And so those kinds of things, they add to the cohesion of the house. It is a house. It's the fire station or whatever you want to call it is a house, and that house should have rules. And I agree with John. There should be no television, no phone. The chef should be respected. The food should be respected. And I even liked it. I had a few houses where, where we had a few religious officers, and I appreciate it. They said, everybody, we're going to bow our heads and pray before the meal. Good. Do that. Father John used to make us do that. And then he'd say, now let's eat. And I left out the
Well,
bad.
and Joe says something very important earlier, and I want to ask him a question in a second about some particular dishes, but the best cooks I've ever been around, and right, there's cooks and there's heaters in the firehouse, right, Joe? There's guys that heat stuff up and there's guys that cook, you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? There's guys
one
that
guy
heat
just
it.
opens cans and whatever they can contribute.
Yeah, exactly. But you said something earlier, I don't want to pass by too quickly here, that, and again, Joe was giving some advice to the up and coming or the newer firehouse chefs, cooks out there. It takes passion. You got to love what you're doing. You have to, if you're just going to go through the motions, it's not going to, I'm telling you, it's just going to be that, people who are passionate about making the meal, that get into it, that enjoy it. And that goes back to what Terry said about showing the respect, sit down, which John said, don't bitch about it. What Bobby said, put in, what Scott said, they put a lot of time and effort. They're very passionate. And I know a lot of guys that would sit there and get bummed. You could tell they're a little quiet. Like, what's the matter? Well, so-and-so was bitching about what I made. And I'm like, because they took, you know what I'm saying? But that being said, about taking care of the chef, taking care of the firehouse cook, before we run out of time, we've got some time left though, but Joe, if you could pick, and I know this is hard, I know it's hard for me, your top 3 meals you used to like to make in the fire. What were I know the comfort foods are always popular with the guys, like you said, make something that they ate at home with mom is always a winner usually. If many recipes as you have, if you could pick your top 3 to make at the firehouse and why? I know that's hard.
And I don't want to be like promoting myself by recipes that I put them in a book for a reason. But I made a sausage and lentil stew. And the reason I like it is the ratio of protein, fat, carbohydrates is perfect for nutrition. The other reason I like it, it's an easy one-pot meal. Tastes better the longer it sits and heats, the better it is. So sausage and lentil stew, which is in my first book. The other one, another go-to is with only 6 ingredients, I make a bread pudding. So a lot of times we'd have leftover bread that somebody didn't eat, and you could break up all the bread. That's in the latest one I did, American Firehouse Cuisine. And again, I'm not plugging, I'm just saying.
This is your time to plug.
This is plug. How do people get
bread,
that?
6 ingredients, that bread pudding recipe is, I'll put that up against Bobby Flay, Emerald, anybody. And it's only 6 ingredients. And that's the one I say to firefighters all the time. We generally didn't make dessert, but once in a while, just for the heck of it, if you had some spare time, I would, and we had extra bread. That was another go-to one. I'm trying to think of another one. Sausage lentil stew. Probably, if I had to say, there's a pot roast recipe in there, which is easy. And you try to have a firehouse thing where you have to leave it on the stove for a little while. So sometimes, you take a chance by leaving it on the stove.
Another question for Joe. What's the most expensive meal and the cheapest meal you cooked in the firehouse?
The cheapest meal. The most expensive meal. I think one time somebody brought in venison. And the other stuff that we needed red wine with it. I think that was, and that didn't go over so well. And you talked about respecting the chef. I don't completely agree with that. Yes, if he did well and he did just okay, but you can, John, you can back me up. If it came out bad, you deserve to be ranked on. So there's a time for respect and there's a time for disrespect. And I've had it happen a few times, disrespect, and I earned it. I wanted to try something off the charts. The cheapest one, I think the cheapest one I ever made, I'm trying to think. It's hard to say because it depends on how and where you got the ingredients and stuff. But actually, that sausage and lentil stew is not an expensive meal to make when you chop it up. And that was another thing you talk about, the family and the friends. I remember I had a lieutenant come over to me and he said, I hate eating with all these guys. All they do is make fun of each other and stuff like that. I go, you're really missing out. And I go, for $3 for a big plate of chicken cutlet parmesan, what do you think? You're going to get rich doing that? Sit down and eat with everybody. It's universal. Yes, you're going to get made fun of, and there's other people that are going to. And again, the endearing part of making a meal for somebody. Listen, when somebody passes away, what's the first thing they do? Family brings over, neighbors bring over food for the comfort factor. So yes, the comfort factor of eating a good meal together is great. Preparing a good meal together is great. But any firefighter will tell you that sit down, talk about life, who's getting divorced, who's having trouble with their girlfriend, their kids, all that stuff comes out, and you're not solving it, but you get to vent it together. And again, I agree with John, what he was saying about the cell phone thing. I didn't get to experience it that much. But I'm telling you, if I was working and they had that now, I'd have the same rule. No TV, no cell phones. You know, there's no email or text that important for the next hour that you can't sit and join with your brother and sister firefighters and have a meal together. Enjoy a great meal and then solve life's problems.
Exactly. If it's an emergency, you can say, guys, this is my wife, my kid's sick. I got to take this. And everybody's going to go do what you got to do, like you
Right.
said. But for an hour, you can't put your phone down. So, but this is our time to do a little bragging on books here, because we're always talking about, you know, the Functional Fire Company from the best-selling book from Chief Scott Thompson from the County, Texas. But Joe, so let's talk about just, you know, I know we're limited on time here, but let's start with the first one, which was the Healthy Firehouse Cookbook, right? Or was it
Yes.
Firehouse Grill? First one, a little
Healthy
bit about
Firehouse
that.
Cookbook.
And then,
That did really well. I donated money from that to the Burn Center and all different charities. That did so well. They did the Firehouse Grilling Cookbook in '98. I did a children's book in
and talk about
2003.
that. Talk about that.
It's a children's story book. It's a cute little story book. Again, I dedicated it to my brother Michael, who was, out of 7. Unfortunately, in 2012, he took his life.
Oh boy.
And he worked down at Ground Zero with me. Together, we worked down at Ground Zero. And after that, family issues and whatever, he wound up taking his life in 2012. So I've worked with a great organization, www.ffbha.org. They help firefighter families that have committed suicide, helps the family get through it. They have a scholarship fund, which a girl just received a scholarship from Salt Lake City. Her father was a captain there and he took his life.
We're all very close to that group, Joe. We're all very close to that group. That's an
Yep.
awesome organization.
Yep. And the scholarship went to her. So it had been a long time since I had, I was saying my first book's going to be on the Antiques Roadshow pretty soon. And I went to a demo in Plant City and 3 of the firefighters were there and they came over to say, oh, we'd like to meet you. And so I said, yeah, sure. No problem. And he goes, one guy came to me and he said, Joe, I'd like you to sign my book. My mother gave it to me when I was a kid. And I go, how? I go, yeah, when I was 9. I go, get out of here. Your mother gave it to you when you were 9. I go, how old are you now? He says, 25. So I did the math. I go, oh my God, he's right. So I said, before my book ends up on the roadshow, and we had the 20th anniversary of 9/11 coming. I had this organization I was working with that I'm donating money to in my brother's name. So I said, you know what? I'm going to put a bunch of recipes together to be more current. And so it's American Firehouse Cuisine. You can go to my website and get it. For me personally, you can go on Amazon and get it. And actually this fall, I'm going to be doing a little television podcast show called American Firehouse Cuisine. The set's going to look like a New York firehouse. I have a brass pole. The guests are going to come down the pole. So practice your pole sliding because you're going to be a guest.
Hey, Pete,
Well-
I know our producer's on. Pete, can we put a link to that so guys and gals can link to Joe's site or whatnot so they can get the book?
Exactly. Joe, go ahead and rattle off your website real quick.
It's two sites you can get. Easy to remember. It's
Pete's gonna link it up.
www.chefbonanno.com or www.americanfirehousecuisine.com.
Okay. And real quick, I just want to say this. Obviously, every one of us, our heart, about your brother. So sorry, buddy. I always say this all the time. I know John says it, Scott, Terry, we're blessed. And I'm going to throw this back to Bobby. We're blessed that we work for a boss, for a magazine, for a conference that embraces mental health awareness. It used to be, you were called a coward, you're called a weakling, and all this and that. I work for a boss. My son has his issues, from Afghanistan, where it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to ask for help. And you wish a lot more people would profess that in the firehouse to some of the younger guys and gals so that they would feel more freely to talk or seek help or whatever. And I think Firefighter Behavioral Health, Alliance, Jeff Dill started that it's an incredible site. John,
Yeah,
you
Jeff.
and I hand out the pocket. They send us, we hand out these. That's why I have a stack of them. These little bifolds that you could put in your pocket as a convalescent firefighter with confidential phone numbers, indications of mental health issues, recommended course of action. It's a little bifold that goes in your pocket, in your wallet from the organization that Joe just talked about. So,
The National First Responder Firefighter Suicide, the national line just opened up last week. So now there's a 24/7, 365 day a year national hotline that you can call. It's on our site. Pete can grab the link and put it up there, but it's a national that's staffed by folks that no cops, no firefighters, no, people who do professional EMS, so that you don't get somebody who goes, oh my gosh, that must be something going into a fire. You don't get those people, because and I say this with all due respect, the human mind is one of the most resilient and one of the most sensitive of all the things that have ever been created. And we have to be so careful about how we help and support folks that are going through issues, because oftentimes, albeit said with the best of intention, can have the most devastating of consequences, and you just don't know. And so I always implore people to please, refer folks to professionals as fast as you can. Be there for them, but be careful, because and I'm not a big fan of delicate people, but we're all delicate. In other words, that there's delicate people who are just overly sensitive to everything, but we're all sensitive to certain things. And when someone's going through a crisis, it may not seem like a major thing to you, but if it is to them, it is to them. You know what I mean? And you just have to be aware that, you may not be the right person to be. I'm certainly not the right person, because what works for me works for me. It might not work for, somebody else. And it doesn't mean you have to compromise your values or your position or anything, but just when someone comes to you and they say they're in crisis, or they say they're having an issue, if you think if you have any doubt at all that it's not something really simple, don't screw around with it in terms of mental health. That's just my advice to everybody.
We could do I could do a whole nother show. It has nothing to do with cooking. It has to do with suicide, because I've done my studying on it to try to figure it out and how it happens. And, I think one of the
good luck. There's
with
no figuring it out, Joe. There's no figuring.
But one of the problems I believe with the fire service, and I've done a few seminars for Jeff Dill, because I'm a victim of it myself by losing my brother. I don't get this talk the talk. I walk the walk. I went through that whole thing. It damn near killed me having something like that happen. But, I think one of the problems I've seen is what you just said, minimizing. When somebody's in that state of mind, it's true. They are making a mountain out of a molehill. Like everybody gets, and you can't go in there and say, hey, everybody gets divorced. What's the big deal? Or a lot of guys had their wives cheat on them, or a lot of guys make a financial faux pas in their life. Yeah, to you, maybe it happened to you 5 years ago and you went past it. But to minimize it to somebody else, I totally agree. And I saw a lot of that with my brother, who's making a mountain out of a molehill. To me, it was a molehill. I'm like, what's the big deal? You made a couple of financial screw ups. You bought some property that went down, and big deal. It's only money. But I wasn't in the middle of it. And then they start building and building and building. And, for most firefighters, when people ask me, what do you think about firefighters? The one word I always hear is capable. Like they can do anything. And if they can't, the guy next to them can. So it's so hard for a firefighter to turn around and say, I can't figure this out. You'd never say that to a guy. If you're with a captain or lieutenant and you're trying to take the door, you're like, hey, listen, I just don't have the strength. I can't do it. You're never going to say that. You'll die before you say that. So the same thing, I can figure this out myself, and you can't. It's like you said, your brain is complicated. It's beyond expectations of anything that you can figure out yourself.
It's like taking the crew out. You guys ready to come out? No, we're good. You guys ready to come out? No, we're good. And until you say, no, you know what? I'm telling you, come on out, go to rehab, whatever. Good leaders.
You won't come out till the place collapses around them, and then it's too late. And the same thing with mental illness. That it's already too late. And that's kind of what happened with my brother. He had a phone. He could have reached out at any moment, but the switch went off. And
Joe's right. We could take that topic for 3 days. But the thing to remember too is that when folks are going through those kinds of issues, they're not processing like you are. You know what I mean?
No.
And so, because people always think about mental illness as if it's like a cold, you catch it and it goes away. That's not how it works.
No.
There are chemically imbalanced folks. There's there's just a wide array of things that go on inside the brain. And even the folks that are to the top of the food chain will just tell you they're not really sure either. You know, they've got nobody's sure.
I've read on this, and people that have attempted suicide and lived through some miracle all said the same thing. The minute that they did whatever the act was, shot themselves, jumped off of the thing, I'm saying the few that lived, they said, I have no idea how I got that bad. And the minute I made the decision to put the car in the garage with the motor running, and let's say they lived, they said, at that moment, I saw it as the only thing that I could do to get out of my problem. And now that I'm past it, I'm like, most of them never try again, ever, because they got through it. But when they're at that moment of discontent where they just like, this is the only, they call it tunnel vision. The only decision is this. When there is a half a dozen other decisions, they just get, no, that's not going to work. No, this is the only thing that works. And it gets down to that, and they're gone for a brief moment. They're gone, but then they complete the act like my brother did. There's no, and what I struggle with as a survivor of it is, how could they not think of what this was going to affect their friends and family? Like, how could you not think, like, when you get that telephone call, like, is my brother going to be happy? But they're gone. Their brain closed down for that second and said, this is it. It's probably going to, some of them actually convinced themselves that they're going to be better off without me.
And this is where the leadership, and we'll just selfishly say in the fire service here right now, the leadership has to be more proactive. If you are really truly a brother or sister and have your arms wrapped around that, those words, then size up of a building that's on fire is one thing. Sizing up your people, reading your people is even more important. And I would say this, I'm gonna bring it back to the kitchen table we talked about. When you don't spend time together and you don't go, well, Scott seems a little off, don't you think, Terry? Yeah, he's going through. I mean, when you don't notice, when you're not around each other, when you can't pick up on those little things like you would with your kid even, how are you going to know? And if you're going to sit back and think they're going to fix it on their own or whatever, that's what I go back to that phrase. If you truly, if you have your arms wrapped around this whole brother sister thing in the fire service, then you need to step up and be one. And you're not going to solve people's problems. I think, but being there, paying attention, heading things off the pass. I've had talk buddies into going to the EAP. I've had buddies, hours conversation, say, please don't do this, please don't do this, please. John, you and I've talked about it. Everybody's got an EAP program, it seems like, right? And we say, where do you find that phone number if you need help? Well, it's on the firehouse wall, the bulletin, board, or at the chief's or the company officer's desk. Like, why is it not on your phone? About the time you say, well, hang on, Terry, I'll call you right back. Let me call up to the firehouse, get the phone number. I'll go with you, man. How about we go together? It could be just those seconds you talked about, Joe, those minutes that make all the difference in the world. So until we take a proactive approach to something that's so serious, and that's why Jeff Dill's done so many incredible things. That's why, John, you and I talk about every company officer class we talk about, it's time to step up and be there. And I've said this specifically about the fire service, among all the personal problems people have, it's not normal for a firefighter to see what they see. You know what? Kitchen table, having the meal, sitting down, talking, being around each other, it solves problems at home when you sit as a family. It solves problems at work when you sit down as a family. And Joe, I'll ask you for some closing thoughts here in a second. Scott, to close things out, any closing thoughts about our topics today?
No, just enjoyed it, and the cooking part of it, learned some things, but no, just glad to be a part of it.
Now that you know what sear means, so don't mess up the meal.
I learned.
Terry, closing.
I've spent time with Scott, and I think his best move is just to take me out to Chili's or something like that. No. This has been a great topic, and the closing 15 minutes of this is way different than what we started, but all of it is incredibly important, and something that I'm telling our captains now, Chief, is that I want you in your guys' business. And I think that starts at the kitchen table. That starts with that family time. That starts with putting phones away, knowing who works in your station, knowing what makes them tick, knowing when they're not ticking right, and getting their business. And I do circle this all the way back around, believe that the best place for that to start is sitting at that table. Real quickly, I was going to say this earlier, but I walked into Scott Thompson's office I don't know, 2 years ago or whatever, but I walked in there. So he doesn't have a conference room in his office. He's a kitchen table. His guys made him a kitchen table. I thought it was brilliant in his office and he sits at that table and that's where he solves problems. But I thought, man, good for you as a fire chief and keep that fire station in your office. But, that really resonated with me as just kind of the symbol, that kitchen table, the kitchen, that's the symbol. And that's where everything gets cussed and discussed in a station. And there's no better way to do that than to have a great cook. So,
Hey, it's on the greatest stage in the world, FDIC. The kitchen table has always been up there. And some of the best conversations we had at conference in front of 200 people, in front of 5,000 people, has been sitting at a kitchen table. Chief Salka, John, closing thoughts on today, buddy?
Yeah, similar to what Terry said. Yeah, I looked through pictures of my last day at the firehouse and all the guys that were there. And, the only place I really miss is that kitchen. I look at the picture of that kitchen and I'm like, oh, man. Yeah, that's what I wish I was sitting there right now. Yeah, I used to just love sitting there. You weren't even really the chief or the captain or anything when you were in the kitchen. It was just sort of like the social center of the firehouse. And just guys would just walk in. And I mean, we could all probably tell 10 of the funniest damn stories that we have, and probably 9 of them happen in the kitchen, Yeah.
Bobby, closing thoughts?
Well, I always like to close with a good book. And
It must be slow.
He's our friend Scott, best-selling author.
Must have a lot.
But I think just to wrap it up for me, while you all were talking about how important the table is, and I agree with everything Terry said, so often when folks are in trouble, they just need community, and that kitchen table's a community. It's a safety net. It's where lots of times guys and gals will come to that table and they'll talk about stuff that's really serious or important to them, and we may not know it because they're not saying, "Oh, this is something I'm obsessed with it," or "I'm really freaking out about it." But everybody just gets to talk about it, and we don't know how many folks we've helped, saved, benefited from those conversations. And that's why I agree with everything that was said about turn off the cell phones, turn off the TV. We need those tables, we need those meals, we need those chefs, we need those. I think a lot of what's lacking that we see in the world today is people don't have that sense of community. They're not eating dinner together as a family. There's no communal time. There's no place where they can go and just open up and share stuff, casually, without it being, hey, I need to talk about this. You just wait for, hey, we're having dinner tonight, everybody together, and everybody's talking. You might say, hey, has anybody got a kid who's having, and it comes out and somebody goes, yeah, me too. Yeah. And then it's casual, and that person takes away a golden nugget that might make a world of difference. So I don't think we can ever underestimate the importance of a meal. And I think there's nothing more important than eating with other people. I'm an unapologetic Catholic, and the Last Supper and even our most sacred sacrament, the Eucharist, is a meal. It's a sacred meal. It's sharing, so for me, I choose who I eat with, which is odd, and I will not eat with someone who I'm not comfortable around, and so communion, exactly, Pete. Communion. That's exactly what it is. Meals are communion, and so choose your meal mates wisely. And I think in the firehouse, there's that unity that it brings us together. Communion. It brings us together. The meals bring us together. So thank you, Joe, for being a chef and sharing recipes with us, because just like a drill book, you got to have a good cookbook. You got to have a good drill book, and you're a blessing, and you've been a blessing. And it's such a pleasure to put a face with the name. I was waiting for a famous crime boss to come on because I knew some.
I still get that, believe it or not, even though that
my dad was a lawyer for the family.
Really?
In the 60s. Yeah.
Okay.
And,
Joe, closing thoughts, buddy. Close it out for us.
Well, I got a couple of good ones. And one is exactly what you just said. Share and prepare, put the cell phones away, put the emails away, share and prepare. Prepare first and share a real hearty, healthy meal together. That's one. And the other thing I want to qualify about those conversations around the kitchen table, yes, unfortunately, the fire department has a vicious sense of humor sometimes. And vicious is a serious word. And I used to say I wrote an article actually for FDIC years ago called Good Natured Kidding. So yes, they have sharp senses of humor, no doubt about it. And some of it's brutally funny, some of it. But qualify your humor with the people that you're around, because like we said, we don't know what somebody's going through. So if somebody has a bit, but and conversely, when I ever talk about humor, and I did this with Jeff, as you're the person delivering the humor, which is fine. The guy has a big nose and you want to make a joke. Okay, you look up in the air, it looks like a 2-car garage. All right, ha, I really laugh. And it's funny, but they always go for the throat and they keep going and going and going. And you don't know how the guy knows he has a big nose, a guy knows he has big ears or whatever his little personal quirk is, but you don't have to go for the throat. Make it fun, laugh, everybody, ha, and move on. Not make a career out of brutalizing this poor guy. And conversely, I always use this story. Unfortunately, Firehouse is not it's not corporate. You can't come in with a really bad hairpiece and say, hey, fellas, what do you think? And they're not going to say, oh, wow, you look 20 years younger. So expect on the other side of it, if you do something pretty foolish, that you're going to get a little crap from it. One time I went to Florida and they talked me into putting sun in my hair. And I came back and I looked like Donald Trump when I came back. Yes, and they all unloaded on me, but I deserved it. It was something stupid I did. And it was funny. And again, but that was the end of it. So keep your humor to, I call it good-natured kidding. Good-natured. If you don't like a guy and he don't like you, lay you off.
Well, Joe, I'm so glad we pulled this off. I know we tried.
Me
You were
too.
doing some.
I thought for a minute, because I'm in Vermont, the signal's not great. I didn't think the signal was going to come in.
You did great. And I know we tried before and you were doing a fundraiser.
Yeah.
You're so busy doing things for other folks all the time, which is incredible and awesome. I'm so glad we got this, and we definitely we're going to bring you back.
Great.
And for folks, if you're paying attention, which I hope you are, if you're watching this now or watching this later on, which we get a lot of people that watch this later on, go to Joe's site and read a little bit about him, and then take a look at those books and purchase a copy, and also the reason behind those and why a person that's obviously over and over and still makes a tremendous difference, not just in the fire service, but all over. So thank you so much, Joe, for doing
Thanks,
that.
sir.
If you need to get a hold of him, get to his website. There's contact information on there. Well, another great show, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm glad Terry made it back from Europe okay, from the world traveler that he is. But we're all over Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all the different things. Our next show is August 17th for this group. We say this all the time. Fire Engineering always has some great Humpday Hangouts on Wednesdays. Don't forget to catch any of the podcasts in the evening with some great people. And we always close out all of our shows with this phrase. We're asking you always to please keep the men and women in armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And remember, never forgetting means just that, never forgetting. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Hang on till we sign off and we'll be good. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks. God bless.